My name is Tasha Wong, and I'm a contracting officer for ICE.
I'm Sandra Oliver Schmidt, the acting director of the Procurement Innovation Lab.
Originally, we reached out to the PIL because we were tasked with awarding a multiple award BPA. It was estimated about $700 million for background investigations for all of DHS.
While ICE and CBP were running this procurement, our stakeholders were all of the components across DHS. And we were just a little uncertain about how on earth we could pull this requirement together that took into account all the needs and wants of all these different components.
We were given a pretty strict timeline in which the contracts had to be awarded, which was I think in July of 2021. When we recompeted the contract previously, we released a solicitation in October and the contract was awarded in July. So my frame of reference was that was around how long it was going to take from solicitation to award, 9 to 10 months, right? We reached out to the PIL really as someone that would have our back as we attempted to try to be innovative. Before talking to you and talking to your team, we did things the way we had always done them. I had never done anything innovative. My supervisor hadn't done anything innovative. We wanted the front cover. So even if there was, God forbid, a protest, which there ended up being two, right? We wanted to have that support from the CPO's office because we've heard time and time again that if we're brave enough to take the risk to be innovative, that the CPO would have our back and that we would be covered. And that actually ended up being what happened.
What did you gain from partnering with the PIL? Like, did the PIL do the work for you? Or did you get something else out of this partnership with the Procurement Innovation Lab?
The PIL did not do any work for us. They did give us a lot of feedback and they gave us a lot of assistance and a lot of tips. It was almost like having a private tutor on innovative techniques. What I think I gained that I did not expect to gain from working with the PIL was confidence, right? You know, the people that you worked with, we were all pretty risk adverse and now we're not. So we have more confidence. The other thing is that I always worked with the program office, but not the level that the PIL encouraged me to do, where they're involved in writing the evaluation. They help write the RFQ. They're involved very, very deeply with the entire procurement process. I rely heavily on the program office in a way that I didn't before. Before the PIL, my relationship with industry was more written communication and no communication. But with the PIL, I started reaching out to them early and they help you write the requirement. I find the industry knows more about the requirements many times than we do. And I'm not afraid to talk to them in the way that I was before.
Can you tell us who all you had to coordinate with and what that collaboration, coordination, and partnership looked like?
We had to collaborate with pretty much all of the components, mainly because prior to this contract award, there were only two components that could do their own background investigations. It's called delegated authority, and that was CBP and ICE. Right at the time, perfect timing, that we're about to do this award, every other component gets their delegated authority, except for, I think, FLETC. So because they had just got delegated authority, they needed a lot of help understanding how we did background investigations. You know, we outsourced a lot of it. So we had to speak to all 9 components and help them with defining the requirement. We also had to do a lot of collaboration between the CIO offices because previously ICE and CBP had separate vehicles, separate ATO processes. It was costing the government a ton of money. So they were trying to find a way to centralize the ATO process. And that meant talking to the CIOs at headquarters, talking to the CIO at ICE and CBP, and we actually decided to share that responsibility for the recompete. In addition to that, we had an IPT. So our IPT lead was with the CSO's office at headquarters, and she led the IPT, so we had to collaborate with her. We also worked with the DHS privacy office. We worked with a lot of different stakeholders on this requirement.
Was it a lot of back and forth email, a lot of back and forth phone calls?
We actually did initially rely on email, which did not prove to be efficient. And I have to go back to the time this was happening. We're flying back and forth to actually define the requirements. And then COVID hit and we started using Teams. So the PIL had mentioned that we could actually use the Teams feature to have like collaborative meetings called jam sessions. And that was the first time we had ever really use Teams to collaborate where you have a blank piece of paper and you're creating something together. So we had, I want to say 7 components on the call, a blank piece of paper, and we all worked together through Teams and created the evaluation criteria for the recompete. We just happened to release solicitation around the same time, which is around October, and the contract was awarded, I want to say in February. Even though we had the 2 protests and we had a lot more program offices involved, we ended up cutting our procurement time pretty much in half.
It was incredible. And it was all because everyone was actually in a virtual meeting talking to each other and not just emailing back and forth and editing a document. It was a really neat thing to watch.
I think we had 5 jam sessions altogether, but that was my first introduction to actually working with the program and creating something from scratch. And it was a great experience.